Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on Tuesday, the 18th of November, 2025, which makes this the news and events happening here in Ukraine for Monday, November 17th, day 1363 of Russia's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is Alive at 5 from Kyiv, coming to you from this major European capital currently under an air raid warning, like we always are. Hey, Richard Prexis. Hey, Scotty. Hey, Anthony, Tommy, Tom. How's everybody doing tonight? Hey, Joe, what do you know? You know, it's like you're like a sense memory. Like, as soon as I see you pop in, I immediately picture in my mind an everything bagel with Taylor ham, egg, and cheese. Maybe a little fresh scallion in there. Hey, TKs. Hey, Arna. Hey, Daryl Roberts. Hey, Chef Deb. Hey, Akron. Hey, Den. Hey, Bjorn. I'm doing okay. Shark, how you living? Hey, Sav Master. Hey, Bjorn. And the peeps continue to come in. There's Nightshade. There's Eli. Hey, Feisty. Hey, Clive Sutton. Hey, Darlene. Hey, Paul. Mike Kelly. Marius, how you doing? Flying Sunbeams. Hey, Dawn Patrols. How's everybody doing tonight? Everybody have a nice weekend. Hey, Roy Daniels. There's Roy Daniels, who's been a moderator without any recognition for months and months and months. Totally forgot we added him during a live one night when we were choking for help. So everybody, Roy Daniels is one of our moderators. Thank him, please, for hanging out. Hey, Chrissy Locks. Hey, Hyde. Hey, Pugga Mahone. Hey, Parda. I don't see Scully yet. Is Scully here? Scully's our sponsor tonight. When Scully comes in, give her a thank you. Hey, Mike Kelly. Hey, Nicola Jones. So just while people are coming in, really interesting thing. There's two things that have come to light here that we have not talked about and that I've only learned of today. So you might have seen there was an explosion on a rail line in Poland over the weekend, and we'll talk about that. But one of the things that came out of that was an interview with a Polish general by the name of, I'm not saying this right, Kletsk, something like that. So this Polish general, he's talking about threats to Poland. And you know what he says? He says the narrative that those, remember the drones that came into Poland, the 24 drones that entered Polish airspace? What have we been told about them? We've been told that they were Gaberas, that is decoy drones made of foam, rubber, and plastic mostly, plywood and foam rubber, and that they were unarmed and that they had been fitted with extra gas tanks, fuel tanks, so that they could make the journey to Poland, right? That's what we've been told about those drones. Well, this Polish general, in front of the press this weekend, says that that narrative, that these were just foam, rubber, and plywood, is not exactly accurate. Some of those drones were rigged with explosives. Now, this is the first time that I've heard this. I mean, initially when it happened, there was a lot of talk about whether they were or whether they weren't. But if this guy is right, then that really changes the nature of the incursion. You know, I went along with everybody when they said it's not an attack, it's a provocation. These drones aren't armed. Well, I'm sorry, if they were, then it's an attack. It's not just a provocation. That's what it would mean, TK's daddy, which may be very much why the politicians wanted to sweep this under the rug. Because it's goddamn Article 5. And yesterday's explosion on the Polish railways is another example of that. Now, everybody is going to say, we don't know who blew up Polish railways. Bullshit, we don't know who blew up Polish railways. Sure, maybe it was some locals, some Poles, some criminals, right, who were hired by Russia. It's still the Russians. You goddamn know it's the Russians. It's the goddamn Warsaw-Lublin line. Lublin is a town right on the border with Ukraine. It's a major rail line for ammunition, weapons, medicine, humanitarian aid, food, etc. So clearly the goal is to hurt Ukraine and to let the Poles know we're not afraid to blow shit up in your neighborhood, right? That's really what they're saying. So we might as well start with that. Donald Tusk, the PM for Poland, called the strike an unprecedented act of sabotage and vowed to catch those responsible, whoever they are. And we know who they are, right? They're going to be some scumbags in Poland that got hired by the Russians or the Belarusians. That's what we're looking at there. A source inside Polish security forces told the Associated Press that they were investigating whether this act of terrorism, my words, act of terrorism were my words, not the AP's, was connected to Russian or Belarusian agents operating inside Poland, which almost certainly they are. After years now of Russian attacks on NATO and European soil, Western officials say that Moscow's goal in these attacks is to undermine support for Ukraine, spread fear, and divide EU societies. And that would certainly seem to be the case. Now, this attack on Polish railways comes right on the heels of the November 13th attack on the Trans-Siberian Railway. Now, some of you might have been here in the live. You might have remembered vaguely that I mentioned a train on the Trans-Siberian Railways went off the tracks, and that was all we knew at the time. Since then, we have learned that this was a Main Intelligence Directorate of Ukraine attack, a GUR attack, on Russian railways, on the Trans-Siberian Railway. 6,000 kilometers inside of Russia, 4,000 miles. Now, what this really says to me is that nowhere in Russia is safe. That if the HUR can get to the Trans-Siberian Railway, have their agents plant, according to them is what happened, remote-controlled explosives, and then blow the railway up, nowhere is safe for any of these war criminals from the righteous wrath of the Ukrainian people. They're gonna feel it sooner or later, no matter where they run. Now, the HUR is now stating that they have crippled a critical supply line for North Korean weapons, ammunition, and personnel, getting from the Far East to the battlefront in Ukraine. The FSB response, are you ready for this? I swear to God, this is true. The Russian security service, the FSB, says line closed for regular maintenance. Not acknowledging that there was any explosion, not acknowledging that there was any fire, not acknowledging that there was any sabotage at all. It must be bad if the Russians are denying that it happened at all, in my opinion. Now, a much smarter person than me, with much more experience at this sort of thing, a guy by the name of Glenn Howard, who's the president of the Saratoga Foundation, and a seasoned Washington, D.C. insider when it comes to Russian politics and strategy with the Russians, said that the recent attack symbolizes the connections between the Pacific and Ukraine. Now, in my opinion, this is an important insight, right? What Mr. Howard is saying is that to all those people in the United States who think we shouldn't support Ukraine, but we should focus on China and Taiwan, they're missing the reality that these two theaters of conflict are intimately connected. And if we take our eye off the ball in Europe, it's going to be a problem not merely for Europe, but in the Pacific as well, because the two theaters are intimately connected. In his words, the Indo-Pacific theater starts in Ukraine. There is a striking dichotomy between these two attacks that I would point out to everybody. The neighbors are at it again, apparently. There's a striking dichotomy between these two attacks. The one attack was on Russian soil, and it was designed to interrupt resources coming into the country from a foreign ally. The attack on the Polish rail line was inside the allies' country for the same reason, but it was inside another sovereign nation, a nation not at war. In the old days, we used to call this an act of war. Anyway, okay. We're currently under an air alert, as you can hear. Last night's overnight missile and drone attack, we saw 2 Iskander-Ms fired at the country. Neither of those were intercepted. They caused damage to energy infrastructure in the east of Ukraine. Then, of the 128 drones sent in, about 91 were taken out. That's about a 71% interception rate, so not bad. Now, the big story, in my opinion, is the price of Russian oil. The price of Russian oil on Friday was recorded at Novorossiysk at $36.61 a barrel. I'm sorry, what? $36.61. Now, that was the low for the day. It recovered somewhat. But overall, if we take into account the spot price for Russian oil out of the Baltic seaports, Novorossiysk and Tuapse, then what we see is that there is a widening discount from the benchmark price of Brent crude. So the benchmark price of Brent crude is hovering just about $60 a barrel. This would make the discount from Brent crude $23.52 on average. That's approaching the highest it's ever been. Right after the EU sanctions went into effect, it was $30. But the next highest benchmark after that is 15. So this is a big deal. And this is on top of the fact that we saw Russian oil exports drop by 27% in October. 27%. And now prices have dropped by 50%. They were they were projecting, right, the Russian budget was was based on $70 a barrel per barrel oil. This is half of that. Now, somebody just mentioned there in the comments, I'm sorry, it's already scrolled, that they thought that the break-even point for Russian oil was $55 a barrel. Well, that depends. If it's going through a pipeline, like much of what goes to China does, then the break-even is between $42 and $45, according to research that was published in the Moscow Times. 42 to 45, something like that. But if you have to put it on a ship, you add a $12 per barrel transport cost. Okay, Valley Guy, you following? So if it's seaborne crude, which something like 3.2 million barrels of Russian oil a day is currently seaborne, that brings the break-even cost up to between 54 and $57 a barrel. They are now selling oil at a loss of something like, because it's going on ships, the price was recorded at Novorossiysk, at something like $20 a barrel. It's what they're losing money. Now, we will see if this trend holds. I was looking today, and the best spot price I could get on Russian oil today was close to 54. So we do not know that this trend is going to hold. But it was quite a striking number to see on Friday, boy. Quite a striking number to see. Or actually, I didn't see it till Saturday, or we would have talked about this on Friday. China and India are buying elsewhere. That is clear. They are cutting back on their purchases of Russian oil. This is the lowest price since the EU embargo on Russian oil went into effect in March of 2023. And the bad news here, of course, is that this price was recorded at Novorossiysk, which means that Novorossiysk, as a marine oil terminal where boats can pull in and have 1 million gallons of oil put on them, is still partially functioning at least. Well, Dawn Patrols, to say that a Shadow Fleet tanker is a legitimate target, what does that mean? Does that mean that you can blow it up? I mean, yeah, you could, but who's going to be unhappy about that 1 million barrels of oil floating off their seacoast? You've just created an environmental disaster of the worst sort. So you can't just blow them out of the water. You have to interdict them. So somebody has to have a legal reason under maritime law to board the ship and seize its cargo. And unfortunately, the so-called coalition of the willing does not show much willingness to do any of that. There's been very little of that done. We saw the French do it. We saw, not that I'm aware of, Seawolf. I mean, it could be, but I'm not aware of the Russians hitting any LNG tankers, no. Why are China and India buying somewhere else? Because of Trump's threat of secondary tariffs or secondary sanctions, right? He is saying that these are going to be the penalties if you keep buying Russian oil. And those penalties, the embargo on Russian oil, the sanctions against Rosneft and Lukoil are devastating. Make no mistake, they have teeth. Even though the Treasury Department has recently kind of softened the blow a little bit. They've made it easier for companies to purchase Lukoil assets abroad. Anyway, to answer your question, Kennedy, the reason that they are cutting back on their buying of Russian oil is for fear of economic of an economic nuke being dropped on their economies. Oh, yeah, the war is causing enormous pollution. It's a real problem. Nanopam, I don't understand what that means. You there every day? Was that directed at somebody else? Paul wants to know if the reality of the Russian atrocities will be realized by the average Russian eventually. No, not the average Russian that's alive today. It's just like the Yazis that went to the gallows in Nuremberg, and to many Germans who lived under Nazism. The guys at Nuremberg all went to the gallows screaming that they were right and the world was wrong. You're not going to change these people. You're not going to change that 80-year-old woman that I saw in 1420. Is it 1420 or 1490? It's a Russian channel on YouTube. And I don't know how this guy operates. But somehow he gets around Russia and he asks Russians the hard questions. And almost nobody answers him. Or they answer with the party line. Right? But one woman, talking about the Ukraine conflict, said to him, "We should have murdered them all. Every one of them. And we still can." That was her. Genocide is their solution. So these are not a people that are going to be very introspective, I'm afraid. Hey, Norbert Hackoff. Oh, that tanker that's burning on the Danube. That's an LNG tanker. I did not know that. So from Friday, if you remember on Friday, we were talking about the big strike on the port of Odessa. And we were talking about the fact that some drones went into Romanian airspace. And the Romanians were keeping it quiet and there wasn't much talk about it. I did see today that the Romanians are evacuating a town across the river from a burning tanker. And I did wonder, why, what would be the concern there? The report was not clear. It would make sense that they would want to evacuate the town if there's an LNG tanker over there. But I'm not aware of any LNG facilities at Danube, at the port of Ishmael. So that's maybe, I don't know. Yeah, Roy, I did see that. The Trump administration claims to be working on a new sanctions package against the Russians. We shall see, right? If it gets anywhere. Trump is quite good at slowing things up. Dino, we did talk about the Polish railroad bombing. It's currently under investigation. And of course, I assume that it was some Russian henchman. Well, not Odessa exactly, Seawolf, right? So you got the seaport of Odessa, and then you've got the mouth of the Danube River. And if you just go up the Danube a little bit, you see the port of Ishmael on the river. And if my information is correct, that's where this is happening. Call me Ismael. Well, you can't say that everybody anywhere has a single mindset. But the overarching Russian culture is militaristic. It is expansionist in its nature. And 1420 just did a great interview with a young woman who seemed like she listened to this program. I mean, the shit coming out of her mouth. She sounded like she could be from Berkeley. It was really refreshing to hear a Russian person so aware. And that's why I say it's not this generation of Russians that's ever going to admit to any of this. It's going to be 2 or 3 generations down the road, just like it was with the Germans after World War II. Turkish LNG tanker. Well, flags don't mean very much. Maybe it's Turkish, maybe it's not. And look, man, I'm not Russian. I don't know the Russians. These are just my impressions from what I see all the time. Okay. Now, Ukrainian hits over the weekend. Are you ready for this? Hold on to your hat and get your bingo cards ready. In Stavropol, we saw 110 kilovolt substation hit. In Oriel, the thermal power plant was hit again. In Samara, there were reports of a substation fire and bright lights in the sky. Now, that's 3 power substations across roughly 1,000 kilometers. So it's hard. As I understand these things, and I am not an electrical engineer, right? But as I understand these things, there are these power stations and then these substations to route power. And the substations act like a node on the network, right? To redistribute the power locally to the local neighborhood or the local community. Now, if one of these substations goes off, you can reroute power from another substation so that that community has power while the substation is being repaired. But there is a finite number of times you can do this before the power grid itself becomes overloaded. It looks like the Ukrainians might be doing surgical strikes against particular components of the power grid in order to manufacture a cascade failure from overutilization on the lines. Now, I don't know, right? I don't know that to be true, but it does look that way. We'll see what happens. Holy shit. 4 oil refineries in 3 days. 4 oil refineries in 3 days. The Rosneft refinery in Saratov, which is shut down completely now until at least December. The Novokubaishevsk plant, oil refinery, 1,000 kilometers, 600 miles into Russia, processes 8.3 million tons of crude oil a year, was hit by Magyar. It was a joint effort of Magyar's birds, the Military Intelligence Directorate of Ukraine, and the Special Operations Forces. Magyar himself was quoted as saying that this refinery produces high-quality jet fuel, gas, and every kind of diesel. Over 24 oil products produced at that plant. Ryazan is hit again. Remember, Ryazan, according to the Kyiv School of Economics, in September, was only producing 15% of its normal capacity. And this is the 3rd largest oil refinery in Russia. And then the Lukoil facility in Volgograd was hit again, despite the fact that it's offline. It looks like the Ukrainians intend to keep it offline. So as repairs are nearing completion, what do? Double tap, baby. Double tap. Satellite imagery. Remember that big pre-launch drone facility just outside the Donetsk airport that got hit last week? And the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine said, or made the claim, that there were 1,500 warheads there ready for assembly and another 1,000 Shaheds. Well, I'll tell you something. The satellite imagery is pretty clear. There's 2 buildings. One is damaged. There appear to be evidence of a fire there. The other is destroyed. Which building do you think the 1,500 warheads were in? I mean, there's nothing left. Boom, boom, baby. Boom, boom. Now, we don't know if the drones and the warheads were all stored in the same building. It seems unlikely to me if the drones were in that second building that all 1,000 of them were destroyed. That building is still standing. Now, it's possible, of course, that they are, right? I can't see inside the building. I don't know if it's empty. There's a bunch of drones in there that are burned, or there's a bunch of drones in there that aren't. The drones might have been in the other building, but then why hit both buildings? So it's a little bit unclear, but it certainly looks like the 1,500 warheads are gone. We got an update on Tuapse, the Tuapse marine oil terminal over there on the Black Sea, right across from Ukraine. 4 S-400 launchers and 2 radars. The radars are $100 million a piece. Right? That's, you're talking about $500 million in air defense that's just gone now. Another deadline has passed to capture Pokrovsk. Dear leader gave the Russian army until November 16th to take Pokrovsk, and they have failed. I would remind you that the last deadline was August 31st of this year. The deadline before that was June 1st of this year. The deadline before that was now these are all deadlines that Putin publicly gave the Russian army. January 1st, 2025, September 2024, and finally August 31st, 2024. The first deadline Putin gave the Russian army to take Pokrovsk was 14 months ago. 14 months ago. Amazing. Now, look, I still don't know what's going on in Pokrovsk. I don't think anybody does. Is it possible that the Ukrainians are trying to get all their people out of Mirnograd and they're going to retreat under fire? That is certainly possible. We saw early indications clearing that highway to Mirnograd, cleaning out all of the wounded and rotating all the troops out of there, and then only putting a garrison half the size in, would all lead you to the conclusion that this is really a withdrawal under fire. But it doesn't seem to be going that way. Now, again, deep fog of war here. I don't claim to know what's going on, except that I do know that the Russians came into Pokrovsk with an armored column this weekend, 4 tanks and 8 armored vehicles. There were no survivors. No survivors. According to reporting from the Ukrainian Military District Command, the Russians are back to infiltration tactics, sending small groups into the city. Only now it's not groups of 7 to 10. It's groups of 2 and 3. Which is very interesting to me. And it's very difficult to understand what the implications of this slowdown in tempo will be. Clearly, right off the bat, advances are going to slow, right? If you're sending in a third of the men that you were sending in before, things are going to slow down. Why are they doing it? Is it a manpower shortage? Is it an efficacy issue? Is it a logistics issue? We don't know. We do know that logistics have become a major problem for the Russians in Kupiansk. According to the Ukrainian Military Intelligence Directorate, Ukraine controls Kupiansk. Period. Ukraine controls Kupiansk. The body of Russian forces that are attacking the city from the north have been cut off from their logistics. What you've got is a bunch of Russian soldiers who are basically surrounded, starving, and dying of thirst, resupplied only by Russian drones. That's where it looks like Kupiansk. It looks as though the whole offensive effort at Kupiansk has ground to a halt. And the Russians in the advance party are currently in the cauldron. Surrounded, that is. In Novopavlivka, a Russian tank commander thought that he would take advantage of the fog to slip behind Ukrainian lines and create a presence in Novopavlivka and try to take the town. The only problem is the next morning the sun came out, burned out the fog. The tanks are sitting out in the sun where all the drone operators can see them, and they are cut off from the main body of Russian forces 5 kilometers back down the road. There were no survivors. Get this. According to the SBU of Ukraine, an AI-assisted ground drone held an intersection in Donetsk for 45 days autonomously. Now, I say autonomously, right? There's a remote operator. It's not exactly Terminator kind of stuff. There's a remote operator, but there's no one on the position. For 45 days, the Ukrainian army held an intersection in Donetsk by remote control. And that, without putting anybody in harm's way, just the dev droid, as they call it, the dev droid. Droid is a word that is not just in our language now, but has the potential to be in our lives. It's totally crazy, man. It's totally crazy. Our boy Zelensky there was doing a whirlwind tour of Europe this weekend. He was first in Greece, speaking in Greece at a press conference with Greek natural gas company DEPA and representatives of Ukraine's state-owned Naftogaz. Zelensky said it was a huge challenge, facing a winter of Russian strikes on energy infrastructure. And he is right. He was there in Greece to announce a deal by U.S. LNG, to buy U.S. LNG, liquefied natural gas, from the Greeks. The Greeks will purchase U.S. liquefied natural gas. They have an LNG conversion facility, and they will then pipe it into the Trans-Balkan pipeline through Bulgaria, I want to say Bulgaria, Slovakia to Ukraine, something like that. Via the Trans-Balkan pipeline. So that's good news for me because I cook with gas, as some of you who have tuned into some of the cooking will be aware. And so it looks like there is gas coming into Ukraine for the winter. This is crucial, as the Russians now have destroyed 80% of Ukraine's natural gas production facilities. Ukraine is rich in natural gas. There's no reason for them to be buying from the U.S. or the Greeks or anybody. But Russia has taken that gas infrastructure offline, and Ukraine can no longer supply its own needs. Macron says that Ukraine will receive 8 SAM-T air defense systems, 8 upgraded SAM-T air defense systems. They are currently being retrofitted with modern software patches and upgrades before they will be transferred to Ukraine. These things have a range of 50 to 100 kilometers, part of a much larger deal that includes plans, or at least a memoranda of understanding, for Ukraine to purchase up to 100 Rafale fighter jets. Now I'm cooking with gas. You're not kidding, Roy Daniels. Now, look, this whole thing about the 100 Rafale jets, nobody should get excited about that. It seems unlikely to me that it's even going to happen or anything like it is going to happen. And if it does happen, it will not happen for a long time. We're still a year away from the Gripens being delivered. And then integrating this technology into the modern Air Force so that it becomes a capability will take the Ukrainians time. This is not a panacea, but it is certainly movement in the right direction. I thought this was interesting. In international news, Robert Fico, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, who is such a problem, he's a lapdog to Putin, right? He was one of the few European leaders that attended the Victory Day parade in Moscow with Xi Jinping back in May. Well, a bunch of students challenged him on his lack of support for Ukraine. And he told them in this meeting, if they love Ukraine so much, they should go there and fight for Ukraine. At which point the students got up and walked out, since that was a stupid thing to say. Russia has okay, so it's the Dubai Air Show again. It's that time of year, the Dubai Air Show is going on. And this is a big deal. A lot of people sell a lot of jets at the Dubai Air Show, right? The oil money, the oligarchs, the Arabs, they're all there, and they're buying jets, private jets and fighter jets for their militaries. It is worth pointing out that at last year's Dubai Air Show, the Russians didn't write a contract for a single plane. Not one. They didn't sell one. This year, they're going out of their way to embarrass themselves by unveiling the so-called Su-57 stealth fighter aircraft. There is nothing stealth about this thing. It is a nightmare. It does not work. It is not stealthy. If it were, maybe we wouldn't see them over Ukraine. But we do. We do not, well, no, we don't see them. They're not being used, right? They were used in one bombing run. And in that bombing run, it was accompanied by 2 Su-30s just to protect its ass. So it will be interesting to see if Russia writes any business out of this show this year. Again, last year they failed to sell even one plane. All right, so Reuters, there's a report out of Reuters that cites South Korean intelligence and the Ukrainian intelligence services that the number of North Korean shells delivered in September was 0. That the number of North Korean shells delivered for the 12-month period ending October 31st was half of what it was the year before. Half. This is apparently due to depleted North Korean stockpiles. They don't have the shells. The Russians have somehow managed to burn through the Cold War stockpiles of the Soviet Union and the Un regime or the Kim regime in North Korea. It's quite a feat. Now dig this. According to this report in Reuters, fully half of the shells that came in had to be sent to Russian factories for retrofitting because they were pieces of shit. Just absolutely worthless. And so they needed to be reloaded with powder, have their fuses reinstalled, etc., before they could even go to the battlefield. I mean, it doesn't matter, right? It's not like he's going to pay Kim for them. Come on. Don't be dumb. Our buddy Steve Rosenberg, who lives in Moscow at the risk of his own life, so that he can read the Russian papers so we don't have to, cited some interesting articles today In Moskovsky Komsomolsk, the International Federation of Consumer Societies reported that half of all shoe and clothing stores in Russia have closed. Now let that sink in for a minute. Imagine if half of every shoe and clothing store in your town closed. Why are they closing? Well, many were foreign companies, right, like H&M that left Russia. The income of the population is declining, which makes Russia an unattractive investment for clothes and shoes. There are two things coming to Russian industry that the kind of stall traders that, right, independent, self-employed people run these kinds of businesses for the most part. And there are two things that are forcing them to close up shop and give up the business. They can project their losses from the upcoming tax increases in 2026. They know that they're not going to make money next year. They can't. The taxes are going to take them out. Then there's this little number, as reported in Nezavimaya Gazetia. There are new criminal penalties for what we in the West would call white-collar crime, for business or economic-related crimes. Like, for example, for engaging in an illegal trade of appliances. I don't know what that means, how that could be illegal, but apparently it can be in Russia. The fine has risen from 300,000 rubles to 1.5 million. Now, this was very interesting to me. The paper goes on to say, now remember, this is a Russian state-owned newspaper talking about criminal penalties for business. And the author writes, at the trials, there will be no talk of the budget deficit. But clearly, that's what this is all about. So they acknowledge toilets are appliances. That's a great point, Ren Fox. So the paper acknowledges implicitly that this is the Russian government skewering business people to the carpet in order to try to plug the budget hole. And the paper, a state-owned propaganda paper, goes on to compare this to killing the goose that laid the golden egg. And they're quite right to do so. That's what you're doing in this kind of setup. You're killing the business that generates your income. Insanity. It's just insanity. But the Russians are increasingly desperate. Like I said, the economic news coming out of Russia is only going to increasingly desperate. Like I said, the economic news coming out of Russia is only going to accelerate, increasingly desperate. Like I said, the economic news coming out of Russia is only going to accelerate in the negative direction of the major intervention. I mean, the world view that's being presented in the Russian papers is that the economy is fucked. Am I frozen? Hello? Can you see me? Can you hear me? Am I still frozen? All right, let me try restart. Give me 1 second. Am I still frozen? All right, let me try restart. Give me 1 second. Hello, hello, hello. Are we here? Am I here? Are you there? Are we back? Kurian, can you see me? Hey, Birdie B. We here? Yes, 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 yes. Okay, I just have two things here. We're almost done. So Commerçant is saying, they're asking in the paper, or what they're doing, is they're setting the Russian people up to have one of two opinions. We're in a slowdown or we're in a recession. We're in a slowdown or we're already in a recession. That's what the paper is setting up the Russian people for. Real spending, according to Nezivimaya Gazetia, real spending was down 4% alone the first week of November, year over year. Okay, now finally, the last thing that I got tonight. Get this. This is a true story. In Narva, Estonia, which is just across a river from Russia, the Russians have like the kind of tower you see on a prison, right? Like to watch for escaping prisoners, right? They have a watchtower on the other side of the river facing Narva, facing Narva, Estonia, right? The Russians are no longer manning that battlement. Instead, they have a mannequin in camo standing up there. Just a mannequin. And there are reports that all along Russia's western flank, guard towers are filled with nothing but mannequins. Am I okay, guys? For some people I am, for some people I'm not, maybe. All right, well, listen, that's my top line stuff. I didn't see Scully in tonight, but if you see Scully, thanks, Scully. She was the sponsor of tonight's live. I really appreciate it, Scully. Questions, comments, points of observation. Dot never had any problems. That's nice. We got about 6 minutes. Thanks to Scully, who's the sponsor of this live. Ben Tilley is on deck for tomorrow, and then I don't have any other sponsors the rest of the week. So if anybody can sponsor a live this week, that would be a big help. What was the other thing? And then thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces, and of course to the moderator team, best moderators on the Tickety Talk, Maddie, Feisty, Travis, and Roy. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay. Yep, we went over the 4 refineries that got hit this weekend. Thanks, Kurian. PayPal's in the description. Mannequins work. I'm an American, Marty. I only speak English. The mannequins are really like, I mean, come on. Why not leave it empty? What's the point of the mannequin? So, yes, Pokrovsk is definitely having a lot of difficulty. By no means do I mean to suggest that it is an easy situation in Pokrovsk. The situation in Pokrovsk is we don't know. We don't know. We don't know if the Ukrainians are trying to just get their people out of there, or if they really intend to try to hold the city for an indefinite period of time. The goal does seem to be right now to hold the Russians south of the railroad tracks that cut the city in two. So they want to keep the Russians in the south of the city and stop them there. Whether or not they'll be able to is anybody's guess. I mean, if the Ukrainians are really outnumbered 8-1 there, which is what everybody is saying, then it seems impossible that they will be able to hold it you know what, until the first of the year, maybe before. It's very hard to tell. Ukrainians are still in Kursk and Tetkino, yeah. And there's an incursion south of Glishkovo. So it's not a lot of land. It's like 13 square kilometers or something like that, and then 9 square kilometers. But they're still in Kursk, baby. They're still in Kursk. What is today, the 17th of November? That means August, September, October, November. That's 3 months and 11 days. I'm sorry, that's 1 year, 3 months and 11 days that Ukrainians have been going to bed and waking up in charge of Russian land. Don't forget it. No, it's a good question, Deb. I haven't seen grain export data lately. At one point this year, I better not say that. I'm not sure it was this year even. It might have been last year. No, I'm not sure where grain exports are at. But you know what I have been looking at? I've been looking at cotton contracts out of Kazakhstan. The Kazakhs sell most of their cotton to the Russians, or at least they always did. Cotton contracts for 2026 seem to be directed to Pakistan, Bangladesh, India, China, not so much to Russia. Now, you could ask yourself, why on earth would you be looking at cotton export contracts out of Kazakhstan? Because traditionally, most of them go to Russia. And traditionally, most of what goes to Russia is used to make nitrocellulose, which is what you need to make gunpowder. So it's a primary source of precursor chemicals for making gunpowder inside of Russia. And the Kazakhs don't seem to be selling it to them. That's good news. Did you see the post about the UK Navy giving control of an aircraft carrier with 36 F-35s? No, Seawolf, I didn't. To whom? To NATO? I mean, aircraft carriers are just big targets at sea these days in this age of drone warfare. I'm not sure that aircraft carriers are a place to be spending a lot of money. I don't know, but I do wonder about that. Night, Nana Pam. Okay, there's just 1 minute left. So again, thanks Scully, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. Thank you, Scully. Give Mulder my best. Big thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces, and of course to the best moderator team on the Tickety Talk, Maddie, Feisty, Travis, and Roy. Thanks, guys. You're not sure why Kazakhstan is fed up with Russia. Nearly 200 years of murder, rape, and theft. You think that could be it? You think that could be it? Complete denigration of their culture, an attempt to wipe out their language, replace it with Russian, the forced Russification of an entire nation, people, culture, and language. No, why would anybody be upset with that? Not to mention the 80 years of the USSR nightmare, the most evil experiment in artificially engineering a human society that one could create. Night, Feisty. Night, Mike Kelly. Night, Maddie. Night, Gary. Georgian writing is beautiful, isn't it? It's a beautiful alphabet. China threatened the U.S. today. Well, wouldn't be a Monday without a good threat from the Chinese. Right? I mean, these days, frankly, I'm very sympathetic to the Chinese, given how much shit Trump is creating for them for no good reason. Yeah, those French jets are not going to be anytime soon, Drew. Night, Bertie. Night, Richard. Night, Sarah. Night, Sandra. Take care, Alice. All right, everybody. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. Make it a great day and a pleasant tomorrow. Take care.